Okay, I'm going to show you something pretty cool. Think of this as if you've got any administration processes that you're doing in your business that have to be done multiple times. Like you wouldn't bother building this if you were doing a single task, but if it's a job that's done repetitively, we can build a whole automated workflow using AI to do most of the job for you. So the example I've chosen to use for this demo is job applications. So you advertise a job, you get 200 applicants, 180 of those are just applying for everything and they're not even qualified. And then you've still got to open them, look at them, go through the whole process. So we have built this little automation to run through the whole process of receiving the applicants, reviewing them, coming up with interview, checking gaps between the CV and the job ad, coming up with interview questions, making decisions, evaluating them, all that. I'll show you how it works in a second. However, what is probably the key things that you need to know about this before we do it is that Mindpal is one of a number of different platforms, but it's a good one. It's a nice, easy one to use. It's like $40 or $50 a month or something. And you can build as many workflows as you want in here with the help of AI. So you don't have to know any technology. You don't have to be a programmer. It'll basically help you figure it all out for you. All you need to do is have a rough idea of what the process is that you want it to do and explain it to it, and then it will work out all the rest. So what it does, think of it as having a whole team of little AI employees and then an AI manager. So they call them agents and then agent swarms, and the swarm is managed by someone. So you've got AI employees and you've got an AI manager that directs all these employees and tells them what to do. So I'll run one and I'll show you is probably the best way to explain it. So just to give you an overview, just before I do, in this little process, we get a job application in, they go through a screening process. So there's a whole separate workflow for screening, which is a whole bunch of different little agents doing their jobs. Then we get to a post-screening decision and we filter them, whether they're yes or no's. Then there's another workflow, which is a whole bunch of little agents preparing you for the interview, writing the questions that match that person's CV and identifying the gaps and coming up with some behavioral interviewing questions and some situational ones and all the things that you might want. Then there's a process where you tell it what your decision is, and then it routes them into, yes, we're hiring them or we're rejecting them. And then there's a whole little workflow for rejection and a bunch of agents doing their jobs there, and a whole workflow for acceptance and a bunch of agents doing their jobs there, including coming up with like an onboarding welcome letter and a new training plan for them and all that. So let me run one is the best way to see it. It's pretty fast. Now you can run this for up to 100 people at once, but I am just going to put one through so that we don't overcomplicate it. So, and we're going to choose a CV. It's just a sample one of a guy with some quite good sales experience. And we are going to use the job description of an AI engineer. So a bit of a mismatch. Let's see if it can actually identify that mismatch. So we've fed it the CV, we've fed it the job description, and we're just saying go. So the way it goes, doing its thing. It is going to take a little bit of time. So I do have one that I did earlier over here so that we can use that if we need to. So it's now going through the screening phase. So it's sent it off to a whole bunch of little employees. There's the CV screener. What I might do is I'll flick to the one that is already run, just so that you're not getting this flickering screen. And then I'll come back and show you this completed one at the end. So here's one that I did 10 minutes ago. And in this one, I put in the salesperson and I compared them to a job description for an HR assistant. So the CV screener went through and said, yeah, Scott's in Canada. He's got lots of sales experience. These are his skills. And then this is the job description. So this little agent, if you like, imagine it's a little AI person that's job is just to screen CVs against job descriptions. And it's come back and said, well, the candidate's in Toronto, Ontario. Don't know if that's any good or not. He's got plenty of education, but his experience is not really relevant to HR. It's very heavily focused on sales, so it doesn't really fit. So this little agent gave him 2 out of 5 for fit to the role. Then the next little agent went to work and said, okay, that's the obvious things. Let's look at his core competencies and let's look at the core competencies that are needed to be an HR assistant and see if maybe they map across. So yeah, he's got some technical skills with software. He hasn't used Microsoft Word or HRS database management, but he's got some tech skills. He's not got any specific relevant experience. He hasn't got any employment law experience. He's got a good track record of awards and things. He's got some pretty good inferred soft skills. So his fit doesn't still really align, but we'll give him 2.5 out of 5 for that because some of those skills will carry over. Then our next little employee went and said, okay, what about cultural fit? So it reassessed the CV against the job description based on the cultural fit. Said, yep, 3 out of 5. So he's probably got a pretty good concept of employee engagement, but no HR. Career goals don't seem to fit. History of professional growth looks pretty good. He looks quite motivated, but he doesn't look like he's motivated specifically for HR. So we're like, yeah, doesn't seem suitable. Then if we really want to get fancy, we can combine all of that onto a chart, and it's even written us some code to take that chart, and we could upload it into a report or something. We're not going to worry about that at the moment though. And then it's given us our final recommendation saying that no, his suitability for an HR assistant is questionable. He's got a strong sales background, doesn't really fit. I recommend not pursuing him based on these reasons. However, if he'd done a really good cover letter explaining why he wanted to transfer, then maybe we could have done a phone interview, but maybe we should keep him in case a sales role comes up. Then it comes back to a human input where we go, okay, based on this feedback from our robot, are we going to interview him? So for the sake of this demo, I've said, yes, we are anyway. So it then goes through a gate of, is he a yes or a no? So the reasoning is the gate says to stop the workflow if he's a no. So because he's a yes, we're going to keep working on him. So it collects his CV and the job description again, and then comes back and says, okay, we've now got another group of employees, AI employees, who are going to do their tasks under the process, the workflow called interview strategy. So we've done CV assessment, now we're moving into interview strategy. So for this one, we are interviewing him whether he fits or not. So this little agent has reviewed his CV and said, right, here's some things that you should think about when you're interviewing him. These are his strengths. These are the areas that we need to clarify or find out and improve. Here's some things we should explore during the interview, like some of his transferable skills. What's his motivation for changing jobs? How adaptable is he? Does he know anything at all about HR? And then it's come up with some questions that we should ask him about why he wants to do this job and what's he got and all that sort of thing, and why we would be asking those questions. So then our next little robot went away and came up with some appropriate questions to ask in the interview based on interview science, if you like. So we have a behavioral question expert who's come up with 4 specific behavioral questions that we should ask Scott to see whether he's suitable for the role. Then we have another little robot who came up with scenario-based questions to ask him. Then our next little robot came up with cultural fit type questions. And then our next little robot came up with some skills-based questions to look at his transferable skills and his training and development skills and those sorts of things. Then it comes back to the person for your input and say, okay, based on those, after the interview, you've asked him those questions, do you want to hire him? And so in this case, we've said, yes, we do. And we've said, needs lots of training, but he seems like a good guy. So we're going to go ahead and hire him anyway. So then it comes back to our little manager agent that says, okay, what do I do with this information? Well, it's a yes. So we need to put him through the process for accepted candidates. So again, we grab his CV and the job description and the notes from the interviewer, and we put together a debrief report explaining the hiring decision. So who he is, what's the overview, how does he fit, what do the notes say, what are his strengths, what are his weaknesses, and it's still come back and said, do not hire. So even though the interviewer said, I want to hire, the robot's like, I don't think you should because the learning curve's not going to be great, there's too big a gap. But obviously we can overwrite that if we want to because we like him, because he's a good bloke. And so then it's going to generate this acceptance letter. Now, it can't do it yet because we haven't told it what his job title and salary and start date and all that is. So that's on hold. We can edit it and give it that information. It will go ahead and make it. But it has made a welcome announcement for him, welcoming Scott to be an HR assistant with a wealth of experience in sales leadership. These are his achievements. We're thrilled to have him on board. And then it's doing a skill gap analysis for him. So now we're moving into the onboarding part of the process. We've hired him. What are we going to do with them? Well, these are the skills that the job description wants. These are the skills that he's got. These are the gaps. These are the suggestions for building the gaps. So here, then the next little robot, which is the onboarding and training plan developer, puts together the plan for him on what are we going to do? What are our objectives? And then we can send it off to the next little robot, which we haven't yet, which is to create those training modules for him, customized to him for the gaps that he's got. All that done in about 5 minutes. If we go back to our original, It's done the pre-screening, it's checked his competency, it's done all that, it's made the chart. So this is him applying for a different job. This is the same CV, but he's applied for the admin job, and it's the one I set off to run at the beginning of this chat, saying, no, we don't, oh, sorry, it was for AI engineer. We don't want him as an AI engineer because he's a sales manager. And so then it's stopped at this point because it needs a human input. Like, are we going to interview him anyway? So if I say yes and continue, then it will go off and continue with all the steps that we saw. So pretty cool. You can build these workflows to do anything. Like this is just a job application one. I'm going to customize a couple more and show you later, but I just thought this would be a good example of how you can take a whole lot of admin tasks that can be quite complex and manage teams of little AI agents to go ahead and do it for you. Anyway, I hope that's useful. Thought you might find it interesting.